Hello and welcome to our webinar. I'm Struan Mackenzie, Head of Global Mobility Tax.
And I'm Kimberly Bradshaw, Managing Director of Buzzercott's HR Consultancy.
Welcome to our Global Mobility webinar. It's aimed at both individuals who may be considering taking an international assignment and organisations who need to move staff globally. Global mobility is on the rise, there's no doubt. It's an ever-growing area. It is strategically important to the organisation and has career development potential for the individual. One thing we know only too well, though, is how difficult it can be to make it work successfully and get it right. Our experience is backed up by an annual global CEO survey by PwC that found half of CEOs with a globally mobile workforce expected problems in deploying their experienced employees to different countries. Organisations see much money wasted in failed international assignments. There is the cost of the time involved from HR, operations, finance and the relevant work departments. There are the costs of relocation and the individual's packages. What they don't take into account in their calculations is the cost of a failed assignment in productivity and employee engagement. Assignments can fail because of a multitude of reasons, including lack of planning, families not being adequately catered for, or no control over cost. Although global mobility reports into HR largely, we must also consider compensation and benefits, tax and talent management. Aligning those various aspects can be hard. With this in mind, we're going to take you through the top 10 issues we come across in our work and how to address them successfully.
So our agenda today will cover three key areas. Firstly, we're just going to look very quickly at what we mean by global mobility, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Next, as Struan mentioned, we will be counting down through the top 10 challenges that we come across. Most of these could actually have been resolved with a little forward planning or getting the right team involved sooner. So we will be giving you some pointers on how to make sure you don't make the same mistakes. We will be sharing actual client experiences with you, but naturally we will not be naming them for confidentiality reasons. After this, our third section will sum up quickly some of the main solutions we believe will help you transition your staff more effectively. If you have questions, please submit them and we will answer them at the end. There will also be some polls along the way to get your input and your views. So what do we mean by global, or as it's also known, workforce mobility? It is the relocation of employees, which can sometimes be nationally, but is more commonly internationally. We specialise in working with clients from any country who are moving individuals or teams into the UK. The kind of support we find our clients require covers three main areas. These are, firstly, financial planning, so for example tax, and this is where Struan and his team come in. Secondly would be immigration and legal support. This might include visas and applications, employment contracts. Sometimes my team do this, but we also do work with other experts such as employment lawyers or immigration specialists. It all depends on the client and their requirements. Thirdly is practical and emotional support through areas such as cultural training, pre-decision coaching and onboarding coaching. This is another area for my team. Perhaps not surprisingly, these are also the areas where we see the most difficulties and which have led to assignment failure. However, hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will be able to take away some useful hints and tips so both the organisation and all the individuals involved will benefit. So before we get cracking, let's just have our first poll. We're really keen to find out if you have a global mobility strategy in place. All you need to do is press the yes button or the no button. While we give you all some time to answer, Struan, what do you think the figure is going to be?
Well, I think around about 25%.
I would say from the clients I've worked with that probably about 30% are going to have a global mobility strategy in place. Let's see what it says. Well, none of our audience today have a global mobility strategy in place. That's really interesting. Thank you for contributing there. So moving on, we have the 3 phases of global mobility. What's outlined here is a strong process that we've designed over time. Each phase illustrates firstly the legal and technical aspects, which you can see in white, the financial elements, which are in purple, and the human or people side, which you can see in the blue squares. As you will hear from us today, all of this must be underpinned by great internal communications. We're not going through this chart today, but if any of you would like more information, do let us know. We're purely offering this chart as it covers the core aspects that any organisation will need to consider before making an international assignment. And it provides you with the best practice reference chart that you can use in the future. So without further ado, we're on to our top 10 countdown of the global mobility challenges. Struan.
Kimberly, I'm slightly disappointed that tax planning is in at number 10. I was hoping it would be higher. Tax planning is an important part of assignment planning, but only to be considered where the complete terms of an assignment package are identified, the compliance reporting is known, and most importantly, the assignment and business objectives are clear. Income taxes can be saved in many jurisdictions through a combination of overseas workday relief, employer-provided housing, and by using shorter-term assignments. Using a combination of these planning techniques, I'm saving a client up to $100,000 per assignee each year. Social Security for contributions paid by both employer and employee can increase the tax bill by as much as 30 to 40%. Using tax treaties, or sometimes known as totalization agreements for Social Security, this can help by making contributions in one jurisdiction where rates are lower. So, for example, continuing to pay in the US when assigned to the UK will save up to 13.8% on total earnings. Obtaining agreement is straightforward, and the benefits and cost savings are there for at least 5 years. The goal is to save money, but only in situations where it makes sense, both commercially and personally. It's me again. Financial considerations on completion of assignment. It's never too soon to think about the end. Experience has taught me to plan and communicate for exits or completion. When assignees go home or leave the country, it is unlikely that the tax matters close in the assignment location. Under the laws of certain countries, tax liabilities are expected to be completed when the assignee leaves, such as, for example, in Singapore. In other jurisdictions in continental Europe, such as Germany or Belgium, tax residence or non-residence is determined by registering and deregistering in the local community. Please be ready to avoid unnecessary tax filings and payments. While many countries tax on a receipts or cash basis, this is only to determine when the tax is payable and not the amount of earnings subject to tax. I had a client who was tax equalized on assignment in Singapore, i.e. he was paying home country tax even though he was in Singapore. A few months after leaving Singapore, he returned home. Whilst tax clearance was sought and obtained upon leaving, subsequent payment of commission earned in Singapore was made when he returned home. We helped the company manage payroll and reporting in Singapore. We also helped the company address his tax equalization issue. Early on, he had negotiated a favourable tax rate in earnings that were tax equalized. Working with all the relevant teams, this meant his expectations were met and tax liabilities paid by the company were budgeted for. The key messages here are to plan and communicate as soon as possible.
And so one of the first challenges from my side comes in at number 8, which is insufficient preparation. This would involve not getting the right people involved together early enough. The people responsible are typically HR, communications, IT, finance and operations, as well as the individual involved in the assignment. It also comes down to not having a well thought through project plan and the various parties not communicating well enough throughout. The impact of not getting these areas right is a slow, disrupted start for the individual and the inevitable demotivation that brings. They won't be hitting the targets you had hoped for, so your time and cost investment will have been wasted and the individual may actually leave. Either way, it's a failed assignment. Too often we see an individual who arrives with high hopes to find no office, no phone, no staff and no technology. And rather than being able to do their job, they have to spend their first few months setting it all up. A really strong coaching and onboarding process is important to help them ease into their new role and to adjust to whatever it is that comes their way. There must also be a meet and greet plan linked to a strong induction process. It is useful for the individual to visit regularly beforehand. This ensures that all the above is happening on time, but also to acclimatise themselves and get to know people, their staff, and they can also check out areas for their new home and schools for the family if they're coming. Internal communications is key here as well. We regularly see people from other countries turning up to a UK office, where there is one already in place, and they are met with resistance or anger. This is because the local people feel that someone in the UK could do that job better. All it boils down to is the head office not ensuring that the UK office appreciates why this is happening and why this particular person is important. If the buy-in isn't there from the start, then the individual starts on a negative path with rumours flying around about why they might have got the role. It makes it really hard for them to make a positive impact quickly because they have to spend their time building bridges and turning around negative impressions. Again, another waste of your investment and their time. Another common issue we come up against is for people to feel alienated when they arrive because the job isn't what was sold to them. It is essential that the role, the team and the preparation all link into a clear picture of the job and its expectations. Supporting the individual through coaching can help them ask the right questions and prepare for any eventuality. And we're staying with me for number 7, looking at some of these strategic and organisational issues. Not considering these sufficiently can result in unforeseen challenges, incorrect decisions, internal disagreements, and possibly the project being halted. It is important to consider the what, the why, and the who. Why do you need a UK presence? Is it for career development for the individual? Are you building a new market? Are you looking to create a particular presence in the UK? Or is it something else? What are you planning to do here? What's the business case, the people strategy, the marketing plan? And with all of that in mind, who is the best person to do this? We were approached by a client who wanted to move one of their senior managers to the UK, but the organisation hadn't stopped to think about why they needed to move that person and that particular person and what the business case for it was. It's a small but very fast-growing organisation, and as is often the way in this kind of business environment, it was all go, 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 and they just hadn't had the time to think it all through. Our first step was to identify why a UK operation. The answer for them was to test a new market for their product here in the UK. At first glance, their lead salesperson seemed to be the natural choice to send over. But by the time we had helped them create the business case, the organisational objectives, and created a people strategy with clear deliverables, it soon became clear that moving this person was a high business risk for the home territory. Instead, his number 2 was perfect. Plus, it was a great opportunity for her at a time when the company couldn't promote her. Having worked through all this with our client, they then had a strong plan which could be used as a blueprint for any future international assignments. In this particular case, HR had also tried to put a stop to it. It was because they didn't have the time or the budget. But we took the workload off them, supported by the divisional department, and enabled them to focus on their core roles. A year in, there is a small UK team and a steadily growing market. Struan, I think it's back to you.
It is. At number 6, which payroll? I see payroll as very important in this process. It's simply more than a way of paying people and calculating tax. With expatriates, the challenges are to have them on the right payroll at the right time and certainly in the right country. What happens if they're not? Taxes over or underpaid? And whilst this can be addressed through payroll corrections or self-assessment, it certainly has the advantage, if they're on the right payroll at the right time in the right country, of managing cash flow, centralising costs, providing real-time management accounting information, and enabling tax return compliance to be easier at the end of the year. We're often asked, can we have a payroll in both countries? One to pay home country benefits, such as pension, or to pay social security, and of course the other to pay tax. The answer is yes, this can be done, but be clear of the purpose and the reason why you're doing it. Often overlooked in the planning stages before the assignment are longer term benefits such as pension and share plans. In both situations, host country reporting and taxation will be different. Be clear and plan. This could be suspension from home country plans, participation in local country plans, or if all best laid plans fail, then sometimes you just have to report the benefits on the payroll and pay the extra taxes. A thing to be avoided if it can be. A few years ago, a client contacted us. He'd been in the UK and overseas during the period at which he had restricted stock, that is, stock through employment that was vesting while he was working. When the stock vested, he became entitled to the whole value of the stock, and taxes were withheld by his employer in many countries. Although their approach was conservative and in line with local laws, the total withheld was in excess of what appeared to be reasonable. Between the two main jurisdictions, the UK and US, we were able to file tax returns, claim refunds, and in the end, he was better off by several $1,000,000. Time for a poll.
Thank you, Struan. Well, as we're counting down through these challenges, we're interested to know what aspects you think are most difficult about global mobility. We've put a few here for you to choose from, and all you need to do is use your buttons to select the one that you believe will be the highest. If you don't think any of them are right, send us a message and we'll pick it up at the end. I think family issues will be the highest, but I'm obviously biased because of it falls into the area of work that I cover. Struan, what do you think is going to be the highest?
I certainly think the true cost, Kimberly.
We'll just give people a few more minutes, a few more seconds just to do that. And we have our results. So, oh yes, you were right, Struan. 75% of you think that the overall or true cost of an assignment is the most difficult thing, with 25% of you thinking that it's the more administrative side, which is quite interesting because that comes in at number 5, and that's what I'm going to be talking about now. So, number 5, the legal and administrative issues. I've already touched on this, but without a strategic business case, much of the decision making just can't be done. On the legal side, many non-UK countries are really shocked at how different UK employment legislation is from what they're used to, and what impact this has on aspects outside employment, like some of the tax issues Struan has been talking about. In order to meet UK employment legislation, there has to be a clear business case for whether the individual is going to be an employee, a consultant, or an independent contractor. You need to be clear about whether this will be a secondment between the UK and the home country, or will the individual be a director of the UK entity? You certainly have to have a legal UK entity to employ a person. When we work with clients on immigration, the first step is to check if the individual is in fact eligible for the necessary permissions for eligibility to work in the UK. If the role is in the financial sector or involves vulnerable people, we also have to do 2 other checks. One is the Disclosure and Barring Service, also known as the DBS check. This identifies people who are unsuitable to work with vulnerable people. So this might be the elderly or young children. The Financial Conduct Authority, also known as FCA screening and background check, is another one that we have to cover. This is to ensure any person working in financial services in the UK is what is deemed fit and proper for the role they are undertaking. The immigration and visa applications are a lengthy process and can take months depending on where somebody is moving from. As with many of these challenges we have been going through, good communications is essential to make sure that everything is running smoothly as possible and that planning starts very early. Once the visa application is underway, we turn our attention to ensuring the individual has all the appropriate legal documents, such as their UK employment contract, appropriate HR policies, processes and procedures, and that all of it is compliant with the UK law.
Back to me, cost of living issues at number 4. Employees, when offered assignments, become very focused on the cost of living abroad. And in my experience, discussions start at home, where the family sit down and think about the lifestyle and day-to-day challenges of living overseas. So, for example, I have a client living in California and moving to London. The data provided suggests that food and utilities will be approximately $25,000 per annum more expensive than in London than in California. Housing and education should also be considered. Housing has to be paid for by the employee at home, and so only the additional amount should be reimbursed. Moving from most locations to a place like Hong Kong, for example, will certainly result in additional costs for housing. Education for children needs to be considered separately, where local costs must be covered by the government, or maybe even covered by the government. If in the host location the local schools teach a local curriculum in a local language, then going to fee-paying international schools may be the only option with added costs. I've often concluded with clients that it may be better off to offer a local package where salary is based upon cost of living and housing in that area, and avoid the necessity of paying assignment allowances or pay local rates with a lump sum settling in payment at the beginning. A clear policy is important to address issues such as foreign exchange rate movements, negative cost of living, and in one situation I had assignees arguing that their inflated expat packages were also the total calculation for bonus and pension. So, for instance, arguing that their package by 3 was the amount for their bonus. Almost inevitably, the cost of medical and life insurance when people move overseas will increase, and that should certainly be taken into consideration. But on the same token, do consider the necessity of the local costs for a chauffeur and or a private jet. Be clear and think strategically about reward for performance.
Thank you, Struan, and we're back with me for number 3, being cultural fit. When we work with international companies, we find that although there might be a clear corporate culture or way of doing things, there is always a local difference for each country they're located in. This is something that can take people unawares. We had a project helping a religious order move sisters from one country into the UK. They assumed that with a tight framework to their lives and a clear purpose, that they would easily fit into each other's lives and it would all work well. Actually, they could not have been more different. Some facilitated workshops soon helped sort out a common style that they were all comfortable with, but this is something that organisations, individuals often underestimate. Another typical challenge in this section is individuals trying to do business in the way that they do it at home. Unfortunately, what works there doesn't often work here. I went to meet the managing director of a huge manufacturing plant, which was part of a global business. I went because there were a great deal of absentee issues, dissatisfaction and arguments with the managers. All of this had made production drop alarmingly. The MD was fairly new to this plant, and he wasn't from the UK. The country he came from has a very direct manner of doing business. It was easy for me to see that what he perceived as him being efficient was seen by his workforce as him being aggressive and demanding. He actually wasn't being either. What this meant, though, was that instead of paying for a costly workforce development programme, All that was needed was a coaching program for the managing director. Through it, he quickly learned how to get the best out of his team, and production returned to normal. Some organisations also fail to see how spending a bit more time preparing the individual and the UK team can make a big difference to their bottom line and to the success of the assignment. Normally, we would include this kind of work into our pre-planning coaching with the individual. But even if they are a regular global relocator, having some cultural coaching can make a big impact to understanding how to make things work effectively here in the UK.
And number 2 is, what are the true costs of expatriates? So what are the real costs of expatriating employees for your business? They can cost up to double the expense of a local assignee. So in budgeting for expatriates, a business needs to consider the cost of relocation, getting the assignee and their family there, living in the host environment, such as housing, education, and the increased cost of living, insurance, international insurance, such as to cover medical and life, additional taxes on assignment benefits to keep the employee whole, where tax rates are higher in the host location, or in regard to things such as employment-related share schemes and pension funding, where there may be no tax in the home location and fully taxable benefits in the host. The additional cost should be balanced by ensuring that the employee makes a reasonable contribution. If he had stayed at home, he would be paying tax and certainly incurring day-to-day living expenses. In short, be clear on your policy on what the costs are and secure belief in and approval for your budgets. For example, I have assignees moving to the UK where the stay-at-home salary and package is $300,000, while here in the UK, the enhanced package is $500,000. Think ahead. Experience says that you should not commit to an expatriate package without any parameters. Some companies will agree to full expatriate terms for up to 3 years. Others will offer benefits on a reducing scale over a 3-year period or pay a lump sum at the beginning. The alternative is, of course, to pay a local salary with no enhancements. I always recommend that if you are paying a full expatriate package, reduce over a period of time and never guarantee. Finally, don't forget the impact on the local teams such as HR, finance, payroll and tax. Please identify adequate resource and be clear on the terms and conditions from the beginning to avoid misunderstandings and overspendings later.
Well, I'm sorry, Struan, but at number 1 is family concerns, and this is the main reason why international assignments fail. As such, it's one of the main areas we support our clients with. There are 3 key issues that arise here. One is that the partner or family don't come to the UK with the international assignee. This means that the individual is alone in a strange country and without their loved ones and support network. Plus, they spend their lives shooting backwards and forwards on a plane between home and the UK. Another issue is that the partner or family do come to, but they don't like it, don't settle, and want to go home. This puts huge pressure on the individual to give up the assignment and return home with their family, or they end up in the first category of having to stay here by themselves without their family. The third area can be that the person and their family come, but the individual doesn't like the job, the culture, the UK, and they just want to leave. Any scenario along these 3 lines means that the individual is potentially damaging their career potential or standing with the organisation, as well as putting strain on their family lives. But the organisation also suffers because they don't have the best person on the ground in the UK if this assignment doesn't work. If the individual stays and they're unhappy, productivity and effectiveness are poor, and it can impact on other members of the UK team in areas such as employee engagement and output. All it takes, though, is just some transition coaching to turn it all around. We recently worked with a chap called Joe who had come to the UK with his wife and 3 children. Joe was in great shape. We'd been coaching him since before he was offered the assignment, so he knew exactly where he was going and what he needed. The children had settled in well and had made great new friends at school. However, Joe's wife had given up a really good job to support this relocation, and she was bored and lonely and felt like she wouldn't ever settle in and make friends. This presented a huge risk to the assignment and could have been unpleasant for everyone involved, including the company. We gave her some career coaching, and we quickly helped her identify what she could do and how to adapt her CV and applications to the UK style. She soon found a job that she loves, and that was even before her coaching program finished. What we know is that if an individual or family make it past the 6 months mark, then the assignment will be successful. Joe and his family are now nearly 2 years in. Well, that concludes our top 10 countdown. Struan, how would you summarise the main learning points from the challenges that our clients face?
Well, here we are. Here are our top 10 tips for successfully relocating employees overseas. I won't go through this now, but Kimberly, I think this is a great summary and takeaway for getting the most out of international assignments. In short, plan, identify all key stakeholders, communicate, budget, prepare, and above all, remember the human factor of the assignee and their family. Thank you.
So if anyone has any questions, we haven't had any sent through yet, but if you do, just type some in. In the meantime, while we're just waiting a few moments, you can see our contact details there. You are also able to find all these contact details on the Buzzercott website. We don't have any questions, so obviously we've answered everything that people might need to know, Struan. So all that remains is for us to thank you very much indeed for your attendance. We hope you found this useful, and there will be a copy of this on our website available soon. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.